Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining into the Pennsylvania Association of Health Underwriters webinar. We're going to be talking today about commissions and charging fees. This just as a means of introduction, my name is Deb Wilkinson. URL Insurance Group is a general agency that is also a member of the Pennsylvania Association of Health Underwriters. So I thought it was important to make that distinction. We have a couple guest speakers today, and we're really happy to have them. Hopefully the presentation is going to be helpful to you. You can use it as a resource as well. There are attachments to the presentation. You'll have some information on PAHU as well as a copy of the PowerPoint. This webinar is also being recorded, so if don't try to take copious notes. You will get a recording, and that should come out in the next few days. I'm going to, at this point, hand it over to one of our guest speakers. We are going to have with us Vince Phillips. He is the Pennsylvania Association of Health Underwriters lobbyist here in Pennsylvania, and Damian Mochin, who is the president-elect for PAHU. He'll be taking office July, I believe, of 17. So I'm going to turn it over to Damian right now. He has a great presentation for you. And Damian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone.
Take it away.
All right, we want to be mindful of everyone's time today. We know it's a really busy time of year, and you're probably getting all your phone calls from your individual renewals coming in. So, we want to make sure we can keep this within an hour. So I'll move through a couple of my items here before I turn them over to Vince. Number one, on the webinar, the attachments Deb put on there, if everyone isn't familiar with it, the orange button with the arrow, if you click it, you'll see that there's going to be three PDFs attached there and one PowerPoint. So what I attached there for everyone is going to be the National Association of Health Underwriters membership application and a new corporate form of membership. So any of our non-members who are on the call today, there are two different types of memberships. You can do your individual membership. It's still $32.49 per month or $390 annually. Or we now offer a corporate membership or corporate partnership. That's what the other attachment is. It gives the ability for your agency to either pay the fees for their agents or the agency to do a list bill if the agents are paying directly, and all the information is going to be attached on those PDFs. And the reason I mention this is for our non-members and for our members. If you haven't attended our Capital Conference that we have in Washington, D.C. every February, it's very important to do so. Right now, with the balance of power and the election yesterday, the Republicans have the presidency, the Senate, and the House. And what we do is an active membership. We go down every February. We lobby as a team. We meet with the Pennsylvania elected officials, and we try to talk to them about the sponsored bills they're putting in and what changes we need made and why it's important. And this year's Capital Conference is going to be February 13th through the 15th. Now, if you register for something like this, there's a full membership at $435. Because we're in Pennsylvania, you may just want to register for one day. It's only $225, and a lot of us will go down Monday, attend the conference, and then lobby all day Tuesday. So it's something that right now we have a very big opportunity, so it's something very important for all agents. I want to touch a little bit on the topic for today, fees versus commission. As an association, the Pennsylvania Association of Health Underwriters, our #1 priority is fighting for agent and broker commissions to be paid. Okay? Our leadership team has met with the insurance commissioner and her staff, and we're working on behalf of agents to have commissions paid. The association is not taking a stance saying that we would like agents to start charging fees for collecting applications. We have a lot of our membership who had a lot of questions, and what we did was we had our state lobbyist, Vince Phillips, go through and prepare some information to show agents and members some of the different laws and some of the different ideas that agents are doing in other states. And that's what this presentation is for. But the state is actively fighting for commissions being paid, and we are not advocating fees being charged by agents. Okay? So I'm going to turn it over to Vince here to start the presentation.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much for being part of this webinar, and thanks to URL for hosting. I want to point out again that this is a PAHU presentation and does not necessarily represent the views of URL. I guess that's a good disclaimer. Deb is smiling. I think that made her happy. Actually, I was talking to an agent yesterday, and he said, why did you schedule this seminar the day after the election? And my answer was, I thought everybody would want a therapeutic relief from the election. And he said, and so you're going to talk about compensation issues? Oh, well, go figure, right? But nonetheless, let's get started. First of all, you see a course outline in front of you talking a little bit about market changes, transitioning from sales to client management, which is kind of a seismic shift of business models should you care to go that direction, and then talk a little bit about resources as well. Now, a couple of disclaimers. First of all, this is not legal advice. And if you are thinking of modifying your business plan to incorporate fees, you should seek advice from legal counsel. That attorney can advise you as to whether or not your decisions are compliant with Pennsylvania statute and, of course, the Pennsylvania Insurance Department rules. So let's step back a little bit. Just a very quick summary of the world we live in now, and of course, this is not new to anyone. But you have a rising cost environment, you have a volatile political environment, and in that, of course, the bullet number 3, carrier fear of additional turmoil when rules change again, and thanks to yesterday, that's almost guaranteed. Well, it is guaranteed. But when it comes to your bit of business, there's a shift to the individual market where the employer-offered health insurance is increasingly expensive. Smaller groups are dumping their plans into the individual or exchange market, and of course, a lot of the things dealing with the Affordable Care Act, such as the medical loss ratio, such as the lack of the market stabilization funds from the federal government, led carriers to make decisions regarding individual compensation, and these were not necessarily good for your bottom line. So what you have is you have kind of a weird situation where you have an increase in the individual market and an increase in the need for licensed insurance professionals to guide them through the maze. But you also have a countervailing thing where some are saying, well, why use a broker for individual policies when you've got healthcare.gov? Now, the bottom 2 bullets are kind of redundant to what you already know, that basically consumers, if left adrift, are not going to be able to figure this out for themselves, and that they do need to use insurance brokers. So here's the catch-22. Drift toward individual coverage. Individuals are confused, but because of compensation issues, you have fewer brokers able to do the individual business, fewer consumers being helped, and what happens is ultimately possible consumer harm. So what are agents and brokers going to do? Lots of options there. One, okay, we're not making money on individuals, so let's not do that anymore. Or 2, we value our customers enough to continue providing services without being compensated. And I know many brokers have chosen to do that, although realistically they're still looking at how they're going to pay the light bill as time goes on. Another transition, move into the group market, where there's still some vibrancy. And lastly, but not least, is transition to a different business model where you have professional client services. So instead of just being primarily involved in selling insurance, you as a professional are looking at the wide range of services you give them and trying to figure out how to compensate. So what's this culture shift? Are you shifting to client management? Are you shifting to advising? Are you shifting to overall health risk management? And of course there are changes. For example, personal taking advantage of the wellness programs, et cetera, to look at what's good for them, preventive care services, et cetera. And of course, if health insurance costs more, people are going to be a little more mindful of their bottom line. So not to dwell on it, others can do that far better than I, but there are some market opportunities there. For example, the impetus on health savings accounts, which, by the way, was a core element of Donald Trump's platform, and also the continued drift of the middle-sized and sometimes smaller business market to the self-funding model. And, of course, to recognize what you do anyway, which is you're a de facto human resource department to smaller businesses. Another opportunity, and I know some agencies have decided that this will become their specialty, to tell folks, okay, you don't know what's going on, it's too complex, it's too cumbersome, and so hire us as a professional consultant to kind of help you work through it. Now, this depends a lot on your skill level, and I put down, for example, the independent contractor rule or the overtime rule from the Department of Labor, which don't specifically address the Affordable Care Act, but if you're going to be a de facto human resources, those are the big issues right now that DOL is working on, besides some of the health insurance and health benefits issues. The Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, some of that is ACA, a lot of it is not. OSHA issued a revision to its whistleblower rule, saying that employers may not punish an employee for blowing the whistle on them if they're non-compliant with the Affordable Care Act requirements. And then, of course, you've got the hardy perennials, trying to figure out COBRA, trying to deal with ERISA, and, of course, what many agents do, particularly in the individual market, is they help to resolve claims. Now, the caveat there, that assumes that the client has authorized them from a HIPAA point of view to talk to the carrier about claims resolution and also possibly to talk to the healthcare providers. PAHU member Dave Bannett once said that the broker is basically in the center of the wheel. That is, that broker can reach out to all parts of the insurance world to try to get things resolved on behalf of the consumer. And, of course, self-funding and wellness as another priority. So a couple things on Affordable Care Act compliance. Again, skimming through these very quickly because these are things you really already know. Employer reporting requirements. And yes, the IRS did issue final guidance. Of course, final guidance this month means new guidance next month, and then January the world will change. But be that as it may, what's the IRS up to? Secondly, if there is a medical loss ratio and the carrier is involved, responsibilities that the employers have in terms of notifying employees. What do you do with start dates for health insurance for new employees? What do you do if there's a federal audit? What do you do in the individual market to help people document their status if they want to qualify for the subsidy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's look at a business model shift. Well, professional services. So just take a look at what you provide for people now and look to see if there are services that you could add if you're seeking to take another look at your business model. COBRA compliance nationally is one thing, but mini COBRA compliance is a subset of that in Pennsylvania. Enrollments, renewals, administrative support, lots of education and communications to both individual and employees, and then, as always, how do you design a benefit plan that's going to meet the need of either the individual or the family or the business? Some agencies have gone as far as to say, okay, we're a concierge service. Now, I want to point out there's a caveat here. Act 147, the producer licensing law, prohibits insurance agents and brokers for charging a fee for completing an individual insurance application. So whatever your business model is going to look like, it should not have fee charge for that particular purpose. Now, here's some cautionary notes. You look at additional services and you say, wow, the world is my oyster. I can do anything or everything. But realistically, part of your internal processing, do you know how to do them? And if you don't know how, do you have access to the expertise to perform these services? For example, ACA reporting is kind of a cottage industry, and you might want to use a wholesaler to do that, or a private sector vendor. There are resources out there. But make sure you've got those resources in line and in place before you decide to go on a bold new adventure. And also, it's a capacity issue. Oftentimes, insurance agencies that transform their business model and they get more business, they later on lose that business because they do not have the internal capacity to manage that business. So this all involves soul searching. So how are you of value to your clients? Can you look at yourself as a service provider instead of an insurance salesperson? What services can or will you provide? And of course, the question is, what should you charge? The word reasonable is often bandied about, but what does that actually mean? Is it something that everyone can agree on, or will the private sector market decide what unreasonable is and get those players out of the market? And of course, the bottom line is, if you've lost commission because of the Affordable Care Act or something else, if you go into professional services, are you going to make up that loss of income? And of course, part of that is preparing a service agreement, checking your E&O coverage to see if there's pitfalls. And this is a credit to Jim Stenger, who provided some material for this. His thing was overcome the fear of asking for the check, because some agents, incredibly enough, are a little shy when it comes to closing the sale. All right, here's the section on legal notices. Remember I mentioned Act 147? It bears repeating, not once, not twice, but maybe 3 or 5 times. Now, if you charge a fee, the fee must be in writing. It must specify the amount of the fee. It must specify what the client's getting for that fee. And it must be agreed to by the client. Do you get the sense that there may be some ambiguities here? And you have to bend over backwards to make sure that in this particular element, there are no ambiguities. Secondly, if referral fees as part of your income scheme, understand that there are some restrictions on referral fees, not really the primary focus of this presentation. And there are restrictions on how insurance professionals may re-identify themselves. If you're not an insurance salesperson, what exactly are you? Now, in Act 154, which is the Life Insurance Marketing Act that was passed in the mid-1990s, it says that if you are not a financial planner or financial advisor, you can't say that you are, unless you really are. Now, in the property casualty realm, a lot of agents want to be known as risk managers rather than insurance salespeople, and there's no corresponding law. And in health insurance, you can call yourself pretty much whatever you want, as long as it's not violating some type of federal guideline. But if you call yourself something that you are not, will you be running afoul of E&O? So, continuing with legal warnings. If you decide to charge a fee to an individual, what differentiates what you give them in terms of service versus assisting with the individual application? Ultimately, the Pennsylvania Insurance Department will decide, and who knows what they will decide. However, my belief and my experience with the Insurance Department is they're going to take a very conservative and very literal view of Act 147. And if a complaint comes to them where a fee is charged, they're going to assume that the agent is charging a fee for assisting with an individual application, unless you can absolutely be able to document the fact that it is not. In addition, there's another part of insurance law that has bearing. Act 205 is the Unfair Insurance Practices Act. That is nothing more than a definition of terms. It says unfair methods of competition, or unfair or deceptive acts or practices. And here's the quote from the law in Section 5. Making, issuing, publishing in any manner an advertisement, announcement, or statement containing any representation or statement with respect to the business of insurance or with respect to any person in the conduct of his insurance business which is untrue, deceptive, or misleading. And I can't believe I said that without taking a breath. But what it does to you, it gives you a warning that the things that you say, the message that you use to attract clients may be misinterpreted by the clients and the insurance department as helping them with completion of application, which will then cause the insurance department to take a really interesting second look at you. And of course, what do the clients expect from the message that you present out? Now, Act 205, Section 7 simply talks about the really tremendous discretionary authority that the insurance commissioner has. And so the insurance department, they decide whether or not you are worthy, quote unquote, there's a legal definition for that, whether or not you are worthy to continue in the business of conducting insurance. And if they find out that you are unworthy because in their view you violated Act 147, then they could go after your license or put you on probation. Now, help may or may not be on the way. As Damien mentioned, On October 27th, PAHU's leadership met with the insurance commissioner and one of her top staff, and we talked about the commission elimination going on in the private sector individual market. What we got out of the meeting was that the department, first of all, thanked us for making them better aware of the situation, but they also said that they were working on guidance as to when fees may be charged, when fees may not be charged. Now, they didn't give a timetable, but they simply said sooner is better than later. And of course, I reserve the right as PAHU's lobbyist, as does Damien and other PAHU leadership, to bother the insurance department from time to time to see how their timetable is going. Legislatively, there's also been legislation introduced, House Bill 2342, and that's introduced by Representative Tobash, who's from Schuylkill County. Himself, he is a nationwide insurance agent, but he introduced a bill that said that agents can collect a fee if there is no commission paid for individual policies. Now, understand we're at the end of the legislative session. The bill was introduced, but it dies at the end of the session, so it would have to be reintroduced in 2017. Now, I don't want to make a prediction and say that that bill will have traction next year, because who knows, although at least we know the complexion of the General Assembly for next year. But lots of things depend on lots of things, as one of my mentors always used to tell me, and I've yet to prove them wrong. It depends a little bit on the insurance department's reaction, and then the legislative process and legislative gauntlet can begin next year. So let's take a look, and if you decide you want to go into the services business model, what are some of the elements that would be contained within your contracts? For example, who is making the contract? What are the terms? What is the termination? What are the specific services? Again, that's critical. What kind of compensation? And again, if it's a fee-based system, what type of compensation? Is it a retainer fee? Is it an a la carte services fee? What is the amount of the fee? And then, of course, there are also some disclaimers. For example, with ERISA, and also you're not practicing law or accounting. And you may want to put in the contract the permission by the client for you to use subcontractors to help meet those professional goals if needed. I mentioned that there are some third-party resources that can help you, for example, with ACA reporting. If you decide to go that route, does that need to be included in the contract language? And of course, if there's some HIPAA-related issues, those need to be incorporated too. And of course, if there's any potential conflict of interest. Of course, there's lots of other legalese, and that's why, again, I mentioned that if you want to do this, you need to consult an attorney to make sure that that they know you've got your head screwed on straight and you're not promising what you can't deliver. And also trying to make sure that the client understands what is being provided, what services are provided, what fees are charged, and that fees are not being charged for completion of an individual insurance application. And wow, this is just like E&O class, you know, document, document, document. If there is a decision made by the client, what is your documentation? I don't think a signature is going to be enough if someone wants to take another look at that. So what some agents are doing that have gone this route, they will of course have a signature, but they'll also have an email follow-up to the decision meeting that says, you know, dear client, my understanding is that you've decided X, Y, and Z. If there's any misunderstanding whatsoever, please, for heaven's sake, get back to me, and we can further this relationship. So the thing is, clients don't understand insurance. If they misunderstand what you're doing and what you're talking about, what are they going to do? They may file a complaint with the insurance department, or they may consult their state legislator, who will not know what to do with the complaint, and will get over to the insurance department that way. Now, the insurance department gets lots of complaints every year. I think they get, if I remember correctly, over 100,000 inquiries a year, and then they process 15,000 complaints a year, give or take. And frankly, you really don't want to be the subject of one of those complaints. Now, some business plan guidance. I don't want to take pride in authorship of these, because the NAHU president, Jim Stenger, supplied the following slides that I hope will be a resource for you. He basically, he used some other state examples of what they do that allows individual coverage, counseling, and enrollment. And I put it down here because it specifies what is considered reasonable charging in Texas. Also, if you're having a strategy like this, is it better to look at a longer term rather than this is what I'm going to do this year, and next year I'll try to figure it all over again? If you decide to change your business plan, you've really got to think it through as to what you want the longer term to be. And here this gives a number of categories that you may want to incorporate as you attempt to reinvent yourself. And then, of course, Jim Sanger also presented time and activity analysis to have you really kind of get inside the workings of your firm. Everybody knows how to do what they're doing because they've done it, but when was the last time you actually broke it apart and segmented it and tried to detail from a process point of view what you do? And I think this slide tends to reinforce that sort of intellectual activity as you look at the things that you do. And what you may find out is you may find out there's some time wasters, because time is more than money. Time is irreplaceable. They may find out things that you can enhance in line with the increased professional services that you may or may not choose to offer. Now, how does the National Association of Health Underwriters help you? First of all, you've got a lot of resources at the federal level. Compliance Corner is where I usually go because they have past webinars on various issues of interest to brokers. For example, they actually have a webinar there dealing with fee-related professional services. They also have others on consumer privacy. They also have others on how to comply with the Affordable Care Act, etc. But that's not the only resource. Another resource is each other, frankly. Agents and brokers tell me that some of the best resourcing they can do is when they go to an association meeting and talk about ideas. And yes, oh yes, everybody's a competitor to everybody else, but you know, there's a lot of trading of expertise and a lot of idea exchanges that go on here. Now, some other resources, lots of print resources you can get or digital resources you can get, including employee benefit news and Kaiser Family Foundation, et cetera, et cetera. But the resource I would like to suggest that you at least become knowledgeable about on a cursory view, and of course, you've got me as the PAHU lobbyist as a backup where I can help walk through some of the legislative language that may not be altogether that clear. But the basic producer licensing law is Act 147. Now, Act 40, now that was passed as a reaction to banks getting involved in the insurance market per the Barnett Bank decision at the national level and also from the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. But it also addresses the department's philosophy in terms of fees and referral fees and prohibitions. And that way, it's kind of redundant to Act 147. But just keep in mind that if there are penalties involved, penalties add on penalties. That is, if they find that you're in violation of Act 40, if you are an agency that's affiliated with a bank, for example, they may also find you're in violation of Act 147, 147, and of course Act 250 that I mentioned. Now, Act 154, that is a life insurance marketing legislation, but it does give you an element of insight into the department's belief that you should be what you say you are. Now, the law here says that you cannot be a financial planner unless you actually are a financial planner, but the department would use this doctrine in evaluating your missteps in terms of Act 154. The other thing I would point out to you is that the insurance department website is underutilized by insurance agents and brokers, and I would ask that you go there and kind of prowl around to see what's there. You may find that there are resources that you didn't expect. You may find that there are areas in the insurance department website that frankly could be clearer, and if that's the case, please direct those to me as your lobbyist, and I and PAHU leadership would be glad to forward those suggestions to improve their web presence for you. So bottom line is, and first of all, I appreciate your forbearance. It's been kind of a whirlwind tour of the issue. And if I talk too quickly, I apologize to everybody but those on the presentation, because frankly, you're thankful I got through this in less than an hour. So I want to also shout out to Jim Sanger again for his help in preparing this presentation. And with that, thank you.
Excellent. At this time, we can open it up for questions. Damien, did you have anything to add before we look at the questions?
If I could just add one thing, Vince had mentioned about sharing perspectives with other agents and brokers at meetings. A lot of times, if we're at a local meeting and there is a competitor that's across the street from you, you might not be open to sharing some ideas. But I can tell you at our national meetings, like our CAP conference, or at our regional meetings, we're talking to agents that are in Maryland and Virginia, Texas, Florida. They're very open with some of the changes and some of the laws they have. So that's a situation where you can talk to an agent that isn't necessarily a competitor of yours, and you can give ideas back and forth, because chances are you're not going to compete directly with them, and that's been very helpful.
And I'll just second that, Damien. I mean, obviously, URL is a general agency, and a lot of the other members for the Central Pennsylvania Association of Health Underwriters, the local chapter here in Pennsylvania, are our competitors. But we do learn a lot from each other, and we don't share state secrets, but we do share and commiserate with what we're experiencing in the industry, and it's helpful for all of us. It makes us, I think it just makes us all better.
I would add one thing to that too, is that it's not only sharing what business model or business strategies that a broker has, but agents are good to talk to each other when it comes to what they see as guidance coming from the General Assembly or from the insurance department. And every time the department comes out with something, there's always a real buzz on the street. What does this mean? And it's good, frankly, to compare notes with another broker to see if that's the spin that they put on it. And frankly, if there's a discrepancy, that's another good reason to call someone in PAHU leadership or someone you look to as a resource to see what the deal really is.
All right, so there are no questions, actually. I guess everybody's just going to evaluate the handouts and the PowerPoint, hopefully review the information that Damien and Vince shared with you today. Vince's contact information is up on the screen, and I would encourage you, if you do have any specific questions, certainly reach out to Vince either by email, zenobun@aol.com, or on his phone, 232-0022. And oh, looks like a question just came in. Bud asks how you get the handout, and you should be able, Bud, to just click on the handouts and they should come out. What I'll do though is, I'm sorry?
They'll have to click on their the bottom screen for the go-to webinar, and then expand the view with the the control panel. There's an orange arrow that should point to the left. Click on it, and then down below there you should see the links for the PDFs and the PowerPoint.
There you go. It's under the handouts. But Bud, just in case, I will email you all 3 attachments. All right, well, since there are no further questions and no hands raised, again, Damien and Vince, I thank you for putting this together. It helps URL brokers as well as brokers, hopefully, throughout Pennsylvania and nationally. So again, I appreciate your time, and hopefully you found this useful, and you can use it in your everyday lives. So any other questions, just reach out, and we're happy to help. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.